In case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised to evacuate.
Welcome to the Sublation Magazine show. Today's opening monologue was written by ChatGPT. I'm Douglas Lain, and I'm joined by Ashley Frawley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Frawley.
You don't actually have the AI script, I do. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Stefan Bertram-Lee as we delve into the controversial topic of the failure of the bourgeoisie. Stefan is an expert in the field and brings a fresh perspective on the subject. The bourgeoisie, once the driving force behind capitalism, has been accused of being a major contributor to the current economic and social crises. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join us as we explore this fascinating topic with Stefan. And so should I bring him in, or do you want to?
Well, I was going to say, here it is. Spoiler alert. I'm not actually Ashley. I'm just a computer. My face has been superimposed. No, let's bring Stefan on.
Okay.
Hi, Stefan.
Hey, Stefan. So
Stefan's written an article for us in Sublation Magazine this week. What have the bourgeoisie done for us lately? And, you know, as a leftist, you might be thinking, what a silly question. But Stefan actually, well, of course, raises some important points because, as we all know, the bourgeoisie cannot survive without constantly revolutionizing the means of production. And therefore, they have overseen the the wonders that far surpass the Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals, etc., etc. We all know that. But now they are giving us perpetually delayed, underwhelming promises of space exploration and embarrassing themselves on Twitter. So, welcome, Stefan. Thank you so much for writing a brilliant article for us this week. Doug, I cut you off. Jump in.
No, all I'll say is, the name of the article is what you said. What have the bourgeoisie done for us lately? You can find a link to it in the description, and that's what we'll be talking about today. The reason this today's stream is a little behind schedule is because I was rereading the article and asking ChatGPT to write me questions based on the premises of the article, and got distracted by that process and then lost track of time.
I thought it was supposed to be labor saving, Doug. You completely defeated the purpose.
You know, there's always a learning curve because you're trained on the new technology. Go ahead, Stefan.
I got the AI art thing, like, I don't know, in November, I think, when I got this new laptop which has a graphics card capable of doing it. And yeah, I just spent hours like trying to make one pretty thing and making it perfectly, and it wasn't it just became like a thing that you throw hours and hours and hours into. But that's nice.
There's a paragraph in your article where you say that the new innovations, including ChatGPT, no longer threaten the proletariat, but threaten the bourgeoisie themselves. But then that threat is not as dire for the bourgeoisie as the threats would be to the proletariat. Why don't you summarize what your essay is about for people who haven't read it yet?
And then we'll go into it in a little more depth.
It starts with the idea that the idea came to me over winter when there was an energy crisis in Europe. And when facing this kind of crisis, you felt like there was like a vast opportunity for the bourgeoisie to profit by kind of doing new stuff, you know, or not even necessarily doing new stuff, doing old stuff, like kind of opening the UK's coal plants, or, you know, building more nuclear power plants and this kind of thing. You know, these things, nuclear power and coal power, which are dangerous, they're scary, they're destroying the world, blah, 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 but they offer a promise of kind of keeping us warm and kind of, you know, a great force behind them. But it seemed like the bourgeoisie didn't really, there was no inclination from kind of capital to really do anything at all. Instead, it just seemed that we had to accept that we would have less energy. And in order to solve that problem, we would have to use less. It would have to become more expensive. And in the meantime, during this kind of transitionary period, we would have to rob the third world. We would have to aggressively rob the third world of gas, which is led to disastrous circumstances. Like Pakistan and Sri Lanka basically don't have any natural gas. When they do, they kind of supplied like at bargain basement rates directly from Russia, which is obviously not kind of the West to isolate Russia from the rest of the world. And it just seemed kind of pathetic and quite insipid.
So when you say rob the third world of gas, you mean buy gas from Russia instead of allowing that gas to be sold to the third world?
Well, just buying it from literally everyone. Germany especially has just been buying because they have massive gas storage facilities, and this is why the lights didn't go off in Europe over winter. They just kind of bought all gas that was available on any market.
Based on fictional capital, basically running
on debt. On debt, while also kind of paying out more money in debt to their citizens to afford the kind of accelerated gas prices too, which is happening very much in Germany and very much in the UK. So yeah, obviously the state had done various things, but private capital, while making massive profits, and even after the gas prices went up, they made massive profits, and now into the next year, they still don't seem to be like, oh, we're gonna do all this stuff, we're gonna blah blah blah, we're gonna revolutionize production, we're gonna make energy so great. And then I was like, so that kind of triggered the article, and I kind of wrote that bit, and then I was thinking like, okay, they can't give us anything big, but can they give anything small? And I started thinking about kind of the stuff that's been promised to us lately. And there was this advert recently in the UK which triggered a lot of millennials, which goes something like, you know, your parents got the housing boom, your parents got the ability to easily own a home, while you get vegan bacon, which tastes like bacon. Obviously, this annoyed a lot of people because having a house is better than having bacon. But it annoyed me for a different reason, that the thing that's being promised to us, this new thing, isn't anything new. It's exactly the same thing. It's deliberately, they're doing their utmost to make this new thing completely and exactly like a new thing, but the method of its production is different, so that it's safer kind of to produce. It doesn't produce as much CO2 and so on, like on a practical level, but also safer in a moral sense. Like it's acceptable both to vegans and non-vegans. It's acceptable to people that care about the environment, people that don't care about the environment, because it's bacon without the threat, without the sharp edges. And the same goes for electric cars, where the electric car is a direct repetition. The aim of the people that produce electric cars is to make the electric car exactly or almost exactly like a normal car. But again, without it being a moral hazard, without it being an environmental hazard, without it being kind of a practical hazard to produce.
Well, and you change things in order to keep them the same, which I think it sort of speaks more to your overall thesis, which is this is what's being offered to us. It's we revolutionize things we already have so as to keep things exactly as they are. There isn't this task that you begin the essay with, the task that was handed to the bourgeoisie is like, now we just have like, it's degenerated to vegan bacon, you know.
As a member of the bourgeoisie, because I'm the CEO of Sublation, I want to throw this up on the screen. Theory Shot says, this is a little bit snoozy. I want to hear about the depraved rich. So can we go ahead and become more tabloid now, please, and get the clicks? We with the main thread of your piece here is not just that, oh, they haven't given us anything but vegan bacon. And I don't understand that ad. Who would run that ad? That seems designed to make you mad.
Well, that's probably the thing. I think there's lots of stuff which is deliberately produced now to make people mad, to get just eyes. I think it's kind of a degeneracy also in advertising, where kind of the basic numbers, the talked about, these kind of direct quantitative figures overcome any actual impression of wanting to sell things, you know.
Okay, so it's just a matter of getting the name of the company out there, even if it's done on the back of an outrage that goes viral. what you're saying.
Yeah.
But the pull quote from your article, from your essay for me, is it's this one. Let's see. No, it's not. Where was it? It was. Here it is. To return again to the bourgeoisie, can we imagine
the thing is, stop, because I think this is much better than the original, and Alfie edited out 2 of the most fun lines. So I'm going to give extra bonus content to the people. Unseen in the article, additional.
Yeah, in a minute.
Madness.
Can we play? Look, I'm going to read it, and then I want you to play your file if you can. If we can.
No, I don't have it. You should have told me earlier.
Oh, dang. Okay, so.
To return again.
I'm going to set this up. The reason why this paragraph is the paragraph of the essay for me is because yesterday, Stefan threw into our group chat on Facebook a link to a file where he'd made an AI read that paragraph in my voice. And
it was creepy as hell, man.
And it was, relatively convincing. It wasn't quite me, but
Doug, it was your video essay that you put up about Lori. What's her name?
Lori Anderson.
Yeah. Gen X. It was literally that. It was exactly as you read it too.
That's what I trained it on.
Oh my God! You forget about it. We don't need Doug anymore.
I can play it in really bad quality for everyone.
Well, okay. Can I read it and then you can play it so we can compare like real?
You can just read off the.
To return again to the bourgeoisie, can we imagine the heights of demonic nihilism they would wander into if they were freed in this way? Can we imagine what these people would do? Already vast, disgusting wastes of human capacity who accomplish nothing of any note with endless resources. If they were freed from the actual management of our enslavement, everything QAnon claims they do, they might start doing. Perhaps underneath 1,000 pizzerias, 1,000 child sex slave dungeons would bloom or blossom, you say. So
I don't know, man. I think I'd pay for the real thing, Doug. That sounded a little better than the machine.
Yeah, but the machine was very close.
The additional lines I got edited out were underneath 1,000 pizzerias, 1,000 child sex slave dungeons would blossom. Quaaludes would rise from the grave, called by the desperate demands of their old masters. Endless hacked Teslas would be careened into the nearest hard surface as the not driver listens to a final thunderous rendition of Ride of the Valkyries.
So why did those wonderful lines get cut? That's
possibly because I need you to explain them to my thick self.
Quaaludes were a very fun drug that existed in the 1980s, which now no longer exists, basically. It was one of the very few drugs that they basically managed to stamp out.
You don't have to tell me what Quaaludes were.
I'm not telling you. I'm telling the young lady over there.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, can you play the AI version?
This is now going through like a series of terrible recordings, so it's going to sound so bad. But yeah, I can.
Okay.
To return again to the bourgeoisie, can we imagine the heights of demonic nihilism they would wander into if they were freed in this way? Can we imagine what these people would do, already vast, disgusting wastes of human capacity, who accomplish nothing of any note with endless resources, if they were freed from the actual management of our enslavement? Everything Canon claims they do, they might start doing. Perhaps underneath 1,000 pizzerias, 1,000 child sex slave dungeons would blossom. As we look upon the degenerate and exhausted bourgeoisie, all out of ideas, all out of capacity to do anything interesting, so closely tied by the necessity of profit-making, pushed entirely out of the productive realm, the question we should think about is, what will become of us?
I feel like that version of me is better than I was
going to say, it sounds better than Doug. That's right. Oh, shoot.
It does kind of sound, the bad sound quality makes it sound like it's coming from like a radio emergency broadcast after the end, you know?
Yeah, it's like we're on Mars, right? And it's like we're the last person there and you're like listening to recordings of Doug.
I suspect that Doug is, maybe 20 pounds lighter, has a much better life, is invited to dance clubs. just all together. God.
So actually, this is a pretty good segue where somebody says retired Doug.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't need Doug anymore. We don't need CEO Doug. And this is the point. This is the point that you make in the essay, is that that this AI kind of threatens capitalists, which I actually want to go into in a little bit more detail. But can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, to be clear, I think Doug said it. I don't know if he just kind of said it wrong or he meant to say this, but I didn't mean to say that these AIs are not a threat to the proletariat. Certainly, they are threats to large sections of the proletariat, but that's all new technology. I talked about kind of the steam pump. The steam pump was a massive threat to various sections of the working class, but obviously something that we look back on and like, clearly that was for the best. What I think is different with AI technology in being able to replace various kind of human functions that previously would only be operated and done by kind of humans, it prevents a different kind of threat to the owning class. Because obviously there's two things, right? There's bourgeoisie and then there's capital. And normally these two things are connected, but obviously, since even late in Engels' life, Engels was talking about kind of capitalism without a bourgeoisie in terms of kind of like some kind of state capitalism. He was already imagining that sort of thing. And so we can imagine the two being separated. If the bourgeoisie are no longer the most efficient agents to manage capital. And we can already see this kind of thing where large parts of stock trading are entirely automated now. But there's an important element that goes on between the bourgeoisie and kind of representatives of the working class, which previously is very hard for a computer to replace, this kind of human function, where kind of, the bourgeoisie, it's very important for them to conspire with each other, it's very important for them to talk to each other, to schmooze with each other, to move money from here to here to here, to get investment, to spend investment, to kind of fight back against worker negotiations and this sort of thing. And previously to kind of AI, which is able to mimic a human in various ways, these things would have to be done by a human agent. It would have to be done by the bourgeoisie or like a senior representative of the bourgeoisie, like a CEO or whatever. But now, like with ChatGPT or whatever, if the ChatGPT can write the emails that your secretary can write instead of you writing them, then all the emails that you also personally write to other capitalists or the bourgeoisie, well, they'll be soon replaced. And well, when things take a step further and further, the actual practical, productive role of the bourgeoisie will be erased.
So that's the kind of the bit that I was interested in, because from my perspective, I think that any kind of useful role for the bourgeoisie was gone long ago. In very early developments before Marx and Engels' time revealed already the uselessness of the bourgeoisie. So if you think about, Marx writing in Capital Volume 3 about the transition to monopoly, he calls it a self-abolishing contradiction, which presents itself on the first impression, at least, as a mere point of transition to a new form of production. So Engels, too, he writes this footnote in which he talks about how the tendency toward monopoly and concentration and centralization made it a lot easier to expropriate all of this from capitalists as well. But the important thing is that early capitalists, as owner-operators, had a dual role. They did something useful in that they were operating something to a certain extent, and they were also money capitalists. But with the development of the stock market and the transformation of profit into interest, it becomes very clear a transition happens both in the world and empirically. It becomes obvious to everyone that all the capitalist claims like, oh, do I not do something? Do I not perform an important managing function? Are lies, because they can just sit there and just totally passively extract and just leech out of this system. It makes it very obvious that this is a social system of production from which they have a completely passive role in simply leaching out, removing from the system, removing individually from a social process. Now, Marx doesn't say removing individually from a social process, but this long ago, in the transition from like owner operators to just pure money capitalists, it was obvious that the capitalists performed no useful social function. But I suppose I can kind of understand what you mean in the sense of like the necessity of capitalists to kind of oppress the working class and to have some agency in that. And I guess what you're saying is even the bot will kind of even take that over and sort of push the capitalists out of that role of in class struggle. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely right. That kind of in like a real functional role, the bourgeoisie has already been replaced in lots of ways and has probably been for a while. But I guess the kind of point of the piece, because it then relates back to kind of the worry about communistic nihilism, is that the kind of last illusions will be taken away by AI development. The last illusions will be taken away from the bourgeoisie in terms of, you say that it's obvious that the bourgeoisie doesn't do this work, but I don't think it's obvious to the bourgeoisie. And maybe this is kind of
they'll always try to justify it. You know, they'll say, do I not work? Do I not do this and that? But of course, like they can just sit back and do nothing. They can work if they want to, but they don't have to. But at least, you know, the fact that they could and had that option where we don't made it obvious that they were not contributing to the labor process in the way that workers were.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, aren't you really talking about the PMC and not the bourgeoisie?
I don't think so, because I mean, I don't know. I'm a real believer in. I believe in a very broad idea of the proletariat.
So you think do you think the management class, the managerial class that actually has been in charge of creating efficiency and therefore disciplining the proletariat, are workers?
What kind of class are we talking about? I think for me, you have to become very, very senior to kind of step outside of the working class. And then also, I mean, it depends on kind of like, if, you know, there's obviously some people who are very senior, but live in a country where capitalism is undeveloped, so that they couldn't actually live without the necessity of labor. And so maybe it's not actually to do with the function they actually perform.
Like if you hire an efficiency expert in the 1960s to come into your factory and you know, not only create new rules and guidelines for the workers, but perhaps help you to introduce new machines into the process. Is that an efficiency expert bourgeois, or is that efficiency expert proletariat, or is that efficiency expert part of the managerial class that uses expertise and scientific understanding to be truly in charge of the direction that capital develops in?
For me, that person is well, it depends how much kind of. I think for me, it depends kind of what their relationship to capital is otherwise, apart from that job. Like, if that person kind of does that job in the sense that any of us do any other job, in the sense that they have to do that or they wouldn't be able to make their mortgage, and that person certainly is a worker for me. Especially because I think they're a highly productive worker, probably one of the most productive workers, because if they're any good at their job and they actually do the process that you're talking about, they'll massively kind of increase profits.
So if that's the case, then there's a strata of the proletariat, maybe the labor aristocracy, that doesn't see its task as struggling against capital and the bourgeoisie, but rather assisting in creating more efficient mechanisms for capital.
Well, I mean, basically, a very, very small part of any part of the proletariat thinks that they're struggling against the bourgeoisie.
Well, but there are, like, if you're in the factory, or if you're even just like working in a cubicle job, there are little ways in which you try to eke out your time for yourself, or you might demand higher wages, or you could try to get more, in the US, you know, get a better healthcare package, more time off, more like safer conditions. These are all things that, without trying to overturn capitalism, you can do in the name of the proletariat in their interests, but it is simply not in the interest of the proletariat to make the work process more efficient and productive, and to discipline their own class in the service of another class, in the service of the bourgeoisie.
Sure,
So,
I guess they're but they're directly turned against the proletariat in a way that kind of even a non-conscious proletariat normally isn't. But I think that's exactly kind of the brilliance of capitalism, right? Rather than kind of these people are not, the fact that they are just workers like us, but in an objective way are turned against us is a brilliant way to keep the system going.
I feel like I have not been disciplined as a bourgeoisie. I'm supposed to be asking you the questions that were written by ChatGPT.
Well, here's the thing, Doug. Now going back to the Communist Manifesto, as we should go back to basics, a certain portion of the bourgeoisie might peel off and join the workers. So we have this expectation that you'll do that right before we put you up against the wall and shoot you. But there's a portion of, there's the famous lines about the fact that there are strata who are turned against the working class and will probably never be revolutionary because their main fear is being tossed down. It's one of my favorite lines. I use it all the time, but being tossed down, that's their motivation. Is they're not with the working class. They're motivated by a fear of becoming the working class, of getting tossed down into their ranks. And so they do everything that they can to make themselves useful to the system, to the bourgeoisie. And you can see this all over, like the sort of NGO class kind of people desperately just like stamping boots on each other's faces, scrambling up to try and make themselves useful to the ruling class. Oh, I will discipline the working class. I will discipline the people. I will, solve this problem so it's not a thorn in your side. I'll be useful. So this justifies you spending a bit of your profit on me and maintaining me in my class. I don't think that these people will ever be, although they stand for the left now, they call themselves leftists and is what many people understand to be the left. I don't think these people will ever be radical or revolutionary. And I assume you don't mean these types of people. You're thinking more like what? Shop floor kind of managers.
Me or Stefan?
Stefan.
No, I think that the white fragility woman, what's her name?
Robin DiAngelo?
Robin DiAngelo. Well, she's not anymore, probably because she's very wealthy now, I imagine. But when she had a poorly paid job where she moved from dour office to dour office, and her sole job was kind of to discipline the people in there on various kind of social roles, directly employed by management to do so, to kind of act, to try and discipline the workers to act in one way and not the other. I think she's certainly a worker.
I don't think so, because what she had was her own intellectual property that she could sell.
Oh no, but I mean before she published the book, she'd done this basically her whole life.
So, okay. So, but even then, didn't she have material and ideas and a program that she was selling? Like someone on the internet who says, join my YouTube creators program for $200 and you can take a workshop online. And then they're hired by Pepsi Cola to give their workshop. Aren't they just one capitalist?
They're the people I'm talking about. They're this middle sphere of the NGO class. They don't make surplus value. They are paid out. Well, that's a difficult question actually, because no, that's right. Because if it's being purchased by Coca-Cola, then it's not making. They don't make surplus value. They're being paid out of surplus value.
Right, and I mean, but here's what I'm thinking of is like James Burnham and his book from the 20th century. I think it's like 70s is when it was published, but The Managerial Revolution, What is Happening in the World. Like the idea there was, because of the rise of this managerial expert class, the old bourgeoisie, the old capitalists, had been replaced, and they were no longer in charge of the world. And instead, through the state and other organizations, like maybe NGOs and nonprofits and who knows what else he had in mind. But they were, displaced, and these managers were running things. instead. And now you're saying, well, the new managerial class is going to be ChatGPT and so forth. Do you guys see this?
Yeah, what's
gray
going on?
box?
That's
That means my AI program is.
The
Hold on,
CIA is like. So here's the thing about I feel like universities, they create more and more now, not everybody in university, but more and more they create this ideal of the to escape. You escape the working class by going through this, and the promise is that you're going to become part of this NGO class, whatever you want to call it. You can call it PMC, I suppose. But you'll become part of these people who will manage the working class in some way. At least these are the kinds of people that I'm teaching. That's the promise, that you're going to go on to manage workers, to become handmaidens of capital in some way. And even if you don't end up becoming one and you wind up becoming a worker, part of your solidarity, if you feel any for the working class, is not because you feel yourself to be a worker, but because you're pissed off that you are one, that you've lost your birthright, that you were promised that you wouldn't be part of this mass, this seething throng. You were supposed to stand above them with their, I keep using this as a metaphor, with the brute on their faces. but now you haven't got that. And that's part of the reason why you're pissed off. So I'm always like kind of, I don't know, I have one eyebrow raised when people talk about they'll go on and on and on about how truckers aren't really working class, but they'll bend over backwards to talk about students as the new working class.
No, I mean, I'm just very, I forget the word, but no, I believe that the truckers and the PMC are all workers together. How could someone say that truckers aren't workers?
I am
because they're racist.
It depends, because you're defining worker as someone who has to work, right? They're deprived of the means of production, and therefore they have nothing to sell but their labor. But there's also, you have to also take into account how people are making their means of subsistence. Are you exploited in the sense of going in and producing surplus value, or are you extracting surplus value from other people, or involved in the process of extraction of surplus value? Right. I mean, this is like an old and endless debate that's probably totally useless to get into. And
I mean, so the two kind of quotes is the one that you just gave, and then, but obviously, on the other side there is the one from Capital Volume 1 where Marx says, being a worker is the person who works like a workhouse to enrich someone else, right? And the same line where it's a great line, because he goes through kind of that you don't have to produce a concrete commodity to become a worker, and also he explicitly goes against valorization of the working class by saying to be a proletariat is a curse, basically. But yeah, so obviously the police, for instance, if they stopped working, would be embiggered, but they, in no direct sense, do they work like a workhorse to directly enrich someone else. Though obviously, I think if we're more they do, in a very indirect sense, do that. But yeah, it's probably not worth getting into these debates, especially because I think I'm both not well read on it and have I disagree with you two, basically.
Only because you're not well read on it.
Obviously.
No, and it's a humongous debate. Loads and loads of ink has been spilled on it. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think, for my own understanding, when I am reading and building on my understanding, I think the definition that I have settled on is probably useful, but not enough to sit there and make a big argument about it. But I think what people really want to hear about is, why is Elon Musk so depraved? Is he not a genius leading us into the proud future of space travel? And does that not disprove? Because when I was a PhD student, I remember, oh gosh, I used to have on my Facebook, and when people used Facebook, I used to have my cover photo was a picture of a terraformed Mars. So it was desolate Mars, slightly less desolate Mars, and then green Mars. And that was my one of my communist friends at the time said, really, we have to do this, and only communism can. And that seemed to be, people started to lose faith in that when you started to have capitalism seemed to be able to land on an asteroid, or make promises to land us on the moon or again and have colonies there or on Mars. So is this all just empty promises? Is Elon Musk not in fact a genius?
Oh no, I think he's probably a very, very clever man. But yeah, it kind of does show this kind of very swift degeneration, right? Where Elon Musk used to use Twitter to kind of occasionally communicate his grand plans about, transforming the human race, making the human race a multi-planetary species. Mm-hmm. And now he uses Twitter to talk about Twitter.
Do that's such a great metaphor, because I used to use a similar kind of argument when I would talk. I was like, kid who grew up on, I don't know, astronomy and space and all these things that I love. And you see this like key moment where you kind of become an adult and you realize what the adult world is doing. And you're like, oh, all of my promises. Like I remember reading those Isaac Asimov, like kids books, primers on different planets. And it was like, by 2006, we will have blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, I can't wait. And then I get there and it's like, oh. And it was like they sent out for like however many centuries, we were using lenses to see things more clearly, to see deeper into things, to see deeper into the universe, right? And then as time went on, we turned the lenses back around on ourselves to see deeper into, to surveil our own societies. And This is kind of what capitalism does. It gives you this ability to see further and push further, to push beyond everything that came before it. And then it turns it around and uses it to, uses it. You can have steel to build bridges, and instead we use it to make bullets and put us all in cages.
As a CEO, I want to defend my fellow CEO, Elon Musk. And I will say this, you belittle Musk for his interest in Twitter and his stepping down off the pedestal and talking to the everyday man and trying to, but what I think we might need to consider is that in order for us to bring humanity to other stars, or at least other planets, in order for us to make the next great leap forward, we're going to have to be more unified and more creative collectively. And Musk is leading the way by democratizing and freeing up one of the most important elite social media platforms in the world, which is Twitter. Twitter was being suppressed by the state. It was being held down. Only certain kinds of opinions could be expressed on Twitter. Musk, being an entrepreneur, a bourgeois subject, said, no, this will not do. I want to get to other planets. I'm going to bring free speech to Twitter. I'm going to buy this company and take it out of the hands of the deep state and put it back into the hands of the people.
Well, I think the sad thing is that is true. It's not just that Elon Musk can't revolutionize the human species, but Elon Musk doesn't seem capable of revolutionizing Twitter. When Elon Musk bought Twitter a few months ago, both the left and the right gave a mighty reaction to this. Various people, liberals on the left, believed that the Twitter wouldn't exist. That already by now, Twitter would no longer exist. It was sure to collapse. They'd fired all these PMC people, and obviously this would immediately lead to everything falling apart. And then kind of people on the right, and including the very far right, were like, oh, we can say the N-word now, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And neither of these things are true. I mean, I go on Twitter most days. And
please ignore the way my program is glitching. Continue.
I thought you were going to say, please don't say the N-word. This is true. No. I go on Twitter now just to drop N-bombs all over the place.
And yeah, I go on Twitter now, and it seems to me to be exactly the same as when it was before it was bought by Elon Musk. It seems to function exactly the same way. The only difference now is he's kind of in what is a final kind of seizure of Halo. Twitter produced this certain kind of beautiful kind of professional halo of the blue check mark. And then Elon Musk is pushed it in the dirt by allowing just anyone to buy it, which I think is fun. But yeah, apart from that, Twitter just goes on as it was before. So yeah.
I actually think we may be watching or in the process of seeing the destruction of what was, I guess, called Internet 2.0 or the social media revolution, or because all of these tech companies are declining in their profitability. It turns out you're right. Elon Musk is looking at the algorithm for Twitter and just like saying we may have to start over from scratch to get it to do what I want it to do. And what he wants it to do primarily is be profitable, right? Yeah. Derek Varn is going to come back to the channel, by the way, if I can ever stop glitching. And and he was telling me that all of this, like the Bitcoin hysteria and the expansion of the tech world and this idea that was popular at the end of the 90s and seemed to have come back, which is that we can just rely on companies that basically this gig economy idea and everything is just the information economy and we don't have to worry about profitability. All of that was founded upon really low interest rates, cheap money being pumped into the economy. And that's what propped up the social media, the Situationist International. No, but propped up the social media boom. And so now that is going away. We don't have the low interest rates we once did. And we're going to see a major transformation of the internet and the media in the wake of that fiscal change or the financial change. And that's what I really believe. I was just being the devil's advocate before about Elon.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
It seemed like what I imagined as the next kind of transformation of the internet was basically kind of the internet where all these sites are turned into kind of like micropayment sites, in the sense that YouTube, pays millions of people a few cents. I imagined that all social media companies would move to this model where they can all allegedly kind of rescue you from labor, from being a member of the working class. But in reality, by various subscription systems and paying for advertisement on these systems, they obviously overall steal from the working class, of course.
Guys, I'm going to restart my computer to see if I can get up.
Have you tried turning your camera on and off?
No, but I'm going to do that too. I'll be right back, and because I feel like I'm about to drown. I'm gonna say goodbye for a moment. I'll be right back.
I also miss healthy.
What am I? What are we? Chopped liver? My goodness. Somebody is complaining on Twitter that our streams are too white. And I don't know. I am fairly white. I'm not entirely white though. Like I do wear a lot of makeup that tends to wash me out quite a lot. But anywho.
Well, also you sadly live in the cloudiest place in the world.
I know. Actually, I did not know that my skin color was this white until I moved to the UK. My husband didn't either. I went to go visit him a few years after I was doing my PhD, and he was shocked when he saw me. He was like, "Are you okay? Are you ill?" Like he didn't even know I could be that white. I was like, I hadn't seen the sun in ages.
You and your husband have about the same skin tone, right?
No, my God, my husband's Greek. But how can you tell? Because we're always in the sun. He's always in the sun.
Actually, you're POC.
I'm what?
POC.
I'm a POC, partial person of. But this is one of the things that I wanted to mention. The topic we were getting onto when Doug needed to stop glitching out was like, why would you bother creating something? Like you can see, like maybe Musk might have had dreams of freedom that enormous wealth gave him. When that's what wealth is, right? That's what abstract wealth is. It is commanding control of all possibility. And now he's gone and turned that commanding all possibility into something concrete, Twitter, that fucking idiot. And he is realizing the folly of that, probably. But so he may have had these dreams that allowed him to look beyond the present moment. But at the end of the day, capitalism dampens down these desires, because what's the point? Because the reason why you enter into production is not to meet human needs or to expand our horizons as human beings, but to create more abstract wealth, which ironically, of course, is the driver of progress within capitalism and does give us a lot of the progress that we do have. But at the same time, it ironically undermines that progress, because why? That's where we are right now. Why bother investing in something? Because at the end of the day, why bother investing when you can expect such a low amount of return for the amount of investment? But why bother making something? Why bother actually taking the risk of making a real thing in the world? It's far better to just give people debt, or to build up these bubbles, than it is to actually make something in the world. And this is what you saw too with I keep using this example, but I'll repeat it in case people aren't aware of it. But if you looked at the eve of the first lockdowns, and you look at some of the lobby records in the EU and the United States, companies were not lobbying to go back to business as usual. No, I want my workers to work. They were lobbying for bailouts. They were lobbying for enormous bailout packages. And they were getting...
There's a lot less risk involved in that, right?
Exactly. So they were getting huge loans, and they weren't actually investing this and making stuff. They were just taking that as profit. So for a very, very long period of time, nobody was actually making anything. Why bother? And this is like the cowardly capitalism that we have now. It doesn't want to take risks. And why would it? Why would you take the risk of building something that's not the same old? Why, you mentioned in your article that you have this kind of optimism about AI to a certain extent, and about self-driving cars and all that. But you do say, so you're like, oh, self-driving cars, that's a little bit different. But you do say it's still kind of same old. Why not challenge ourselves to really create something new? Like, we have the technology quite easily to create, like, I don't know, little pods that drive on solar power to a certain extent, and then attached to a high-speed rail network that goes over the whole world, and you just zip really quickly all over the place. You have little pods zooming on. We could do that. It's within the realm of technology and so on. Who would ever do that? Who would revolutionize infrastructure to that extent now? It would cost such an enormous amount of money. Even states aren't doing that. Historically, states were the ones that would move things in big ways. If if a single capitalist couldn't, it made no sense for a single capitalist to invest an enormous amount of money, given how long it would take to recoup that. A state would step in. Now states aren't even doing this. We have the neoliberal state, which does nothing but micromanage your existence.
God,
and this is all that anyone wants to do. This is the situation we're in right now.
Well, I mean,
the UK trying to build like 300 miles of high-speed rail has been a process that's been going on for my entire life.
During the COVID pandemic, there was a moment that I think is revealing. It goes to what you started out with, Stefan, the charge that Europe was stealing natural gas from the third world by maybe making Russia break its contracts with them and sell to Europe instead. But what we couldn't do during the COVID pandemic was provide enough masks and other kinds of personal protection from the virus. And that's because we didn't have the productive capacity up to produce those things. And so there was an article that came out that said Trump was stealing masks specifically from, I think, Germany, and some other country too, but maybe France. But the point is, the way that Trump was doing that was by insisting that the American company that had its facilities in China honor American contracts first.
Right.
Okay, so when we think about creating a global rail system that we can all use without, what I guess we'd have passports, and chips in our head or something, but we could all just use whenever we wanted. We're talking about negotiation between so many different states and different corporate entities that are not aligned. I mean, there's a freaking war going on right now that could destroy us all, and that's because the capitalist system is at odds with itself. So we can't create these massive projects and cooperate across national borders easily.
Did you hear that Nigeria got its first deep sea container port? Which, first off, how the fuck did they not already have one already? It's constantly saying how every time you hear about kind of how underdeveloped Africa has been from imperialism and from colonialism and so on, you're actually shocked that Nigeria's never had a deep sea port until a week ago. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, which I think is very interesting about that, was I looked at who owned this deep sea port, and it was shared between two Nigerian state entities, two Chinese state-owned entities, and then a Singaporean private company. And it does feel to me that the kind of, and it's, a great historical irony, or perhaps not, perhaps it's exactly how things should turn, that it feels to me like the last significant creative force, productive force, that's managing capital in some kind of decisive, progressive way is the Chinese Communist Party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did land a probe on an asteroid or whatever. So, don't just.
Yeah, but they've got like a miniature sun or something. That sounds cool.
Well, I was just looking at the chat and somebody said, I just want trains. I don't know where I've seen this now. I probably lost it. I started then arguing with someone else in the chat, but my purpose was somebody wrote, I just want trains. I think that's really interesting because you hear that a lot, right? Like, I remember when I first started kind of doing media and stuff, and I would talk about like, no, we need an optimistic vision for the future. It's not that it's that things can be much better. It's not like we want to destroy the world and rebuild it for the good of your soul so we can all have a communal washing machine or some shit. It's that what comes next, that how history progresses, is that we build on what already exists, and what is being created is potentially, we can make it something better, and we can save that something better from the utter destruction of capitalism. And I found that people were really shocked by that, really surprised by that. And I don't know if people find that so surprising anymore. But I've noticed as time has gone on that the response that I get is much more profoundly pessimistic. And it's like, I just want X. I just want that. And
yeah, it started from Bernie, right? With I just want healthcare.
Yeah. And I feel like this is where we are now. Like, I expect it from the capitalists, right? I expect this from the bourgeoisie. They played the role that history gave to them. They tore capitalism from the womb of feudalism. They played out their historic role, and now they are a regress. Now they're holding us back. But are we taking up the task that history has handed to us? No. I just want X.
Well, I mean, and that's one person saying that's what they want, but and
I'm not criticizing that. I fully understand it because
I want trains too. But...
No,
you know what? Like, that demand, like in Portland, we have a really good mass transit system here for the United States. It's top notch in comparison to the rest of the country, but we have light rail, and there's been talking about expanding it into Vancouver, and Vancouver, Washington, and then into the suburbs like Lake Oswego and Tigard and Beaverton. There is a light rail to Beaverton, but to expand its range, to give people more mobility by light rail. But it's always met with resistance from the communities that it's going to be going to, especially the more affluent ones. They don't want people who can't afford to live there to be able to get there easily. It just, that is how it is. So in cities, the reason why light rail and mass transit doesn't develop faster is because the city itself is conflicted. The people in the city are conflicted about what they want. They don't necessarily. There's a class division, and one of the ways that it's maintained is by limiting the mobility of the lumpen and the proletariat. To overcome the block against innovation will, I think, ultimately mean overcoming class. I don't think we can continue.
No, I think Ashley is right about the trains. That before the beaching cuts in the UK in the early 1950s, there was a train that would stop in every village and town in County Durham, and now there's maybe 10 train stops in County Durham. But that wasn't at the time, apparently, a regressive move. It was meant to be a progressive move, because these trains, which in various ways were highly limited, okay, they can get you to the village or the town, but they can't get you to any particular place in the village or the town. And they run on their own schedule, not on yours, blah, blah, blah. These things were meant to be overcome by the mass propagation of limited use roads with motor cars on them. And then this was kind of the progressive dream that was promised to us. But in large ways, kind of either we got stuck at that point or we failed to get properly through it. And now, again, we're saying we just want trains. We want to return back to that system because the new thing that was offered to us just didn't fully work in the end.
Right.
Yeah, I'm kind of going back and forth with someone in the chat here. Sorry, what I had said before was about that there's less and less incentive as you need to invest more and more in relation to a smaller and smaller rate of return. The incentive to revolutionize production gets smaller and smaller. And this is kind of where we are now. And this is why I really like some of the stuff that Ted Rees brings together, some of the stats he pulls up, like the longevity of companies is dwindling. What we're talking about right now is like, yes, capitalism revolutionizes things. Capitalism has the ability to give us amazing technologies, but the technological progress seems to have slowed to a certain extent. The promises, it's always like, X is going to happen in 10 years, and then you forget about it, right? There hasn't been, for all the promises of additional revolutions, green revolutions, this kind of revolution, they're so slow to come. And this is part of the reason why, like, in pursuit of abstract wealth, capitalism produces wonders, can produce wonders. But over time, the pursuit of that abstract wealth, because that's the main goal, becomes a barrier to the further progress of our technology and of our real wealth, which is production.
Right.
End the conversation with.
Well, we maybe
I was
should
going
end
to
there.
say, do we want to talk about communist nihilism for 2 minutes, or do we want to save it for the second hour?
Let's talk about communist nihilism in the Parrot Room, on Patreon. There's a link to it in the description. I'll leave a comment linking to it as well. The difficulties that we're really running up against here aren't the difficulties. One of the things I wanted to say at the very beginning of this conversation was that rather than being discouraged about the bourgeoisie, which, as Ashley pointed out, could not actually be the revolutionary actors in history, according to Marx, we should be wondering.
Not anymore.
In the 19th century, not anymore. Then we should be asking ourselves, how can we, on the left, the socialists, the working class, organize for a new kind of society, a new kind of politics, a new form of production that can bring the dreams of the bourgeoisie into reality? And, how can we make Twitter a free speech zone? And
but what if we find ourselves with nothing to do? What if the chat bots make all the good tweets and we've got nothing?
No, I have an answer for you. I actually wrote this down when I read your article when you were like, "Whoa, what are we going to do in the future?" This is one of the people always say this, like, "But what are we going to do? We don't have any problems anymore." It's like, Are you
Well,
just
well-
making stuff up now? Like, no, the realm of necessity is always going to be with us. We're always going to, it's not going to be. And in fact, this is something that people are actually like, in socialism, we're all just going to play video games all day. No, you're still going to have to do a certain amount of labor to reproduce your existence. It'll just be a much, much smaller period of time.
I know
You will
what
have
people
to-
will
Yeah, I
do.
mean, I mentioned that in the article.
When there's
right?
no more, when
Yeah.
there was no more want in the world, and we have no more problems, what people will do is join us on Patreon.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military